Hope you enjoyed that, the three-act play King of Men. Again, when John and I presented that, I did my history talk that you heard in my first and second parts of this video series, followed by his play, and then the conclusion, which I'm about to embark on now. So, on 24th January 1797, a group of Robert Burns's friends assembled for dinner and an evening of poetry, song, and reminiscence of their late friend. The menu was deliberately composed of hamely fare, plain food, the usual winter diet of the Scottish agricultural peasant: cockiliki soup, haggis, bashneeps and tatties, and kale. The custom of the Burns dinner, or Burnsnicht, spread like wildfire, so much that within 10 years, critics were moaning about Burnsomania, although their impatience was with the Burns cult and not with the man or his poetry. Today, 225 years after his death, there are Burns societies all over the globe, and Burnsnicht is held from Helsinki to Cape Town, and his work has influenced Karl Marx, Rohinton Mistry, Salman Rushdie, and Bob Dylan, amongst many others. For many, it serves as a necessary feast day to fill the gap between Christmas and Easter. For others, it's a mere piss-up. I think what I've noticed, with my membership of the Lowland and Border Piper Society, is that it's become, in many aspects, it's become more grassroots. You still have the high formal Victorian tartan kilted grand affairs, but you're starting to see more and more small Burns nights where folk are just in their plain clothes, which is why I'm wearing the 21st century's equivalent of hodden gray, a rugger shirt and plain trousers, just my daily working clothes. I think that Burns continues to matter to us, for although it might be stretching a point to call him the poet laureate of the same enlightenment that created the world that we live in today, the factors that created our society are the same factors that influenced his life and work. Basically, everything you consider normal pretty much was invented in the generation before his life and during his life, the Scottish Enlightenment era. And as I've said today, he never shied away from the controversial or uncomfortable topics. And that is particularly relevant today when people simply don't want to think, don't want to, much less talk about items that make them uncomfortable, that concern them. We have universities that now pander to ignorance rather than try to correct it. It's ridiculous. You might argue that his poetry and his work was inspired by the creation of the Age of Reason and the Age of Enlightenment. And recent events in North America really seem to indicate that we've reached the end of Enlightenment, the end of the Age of Reason. Certainly the end of, or at least a very severe injury to that political experiment that Burns's generation called the Great Experiment, the founding of the United States, in its principles. All of those principles were founded in the Scottish Enlightenment. So even as you must return, he never ever shied away from controversial or uncomfortable topics, and we would do well to consider his example in our era of moral cowardice that we too often dress up as political correctness. For even so, as you must return to first principles to solve an equation, those who would fully understand our culture and address its problems should direct their attention to the era that created it, more specifically through the words of the poet who was there. On that note, it's been a few years, but most of you listened to President Obama's speech, and the fact that a percentage of you just bristled as I said that is a clear indictment of the decline of our age of reason. I've listened to it twice, and I've gone through the transcript line by line. You could present that speech, President Obama's inauguration speech, as the executive summary of the thoughts and ideals of the Scottish Enlightenment. Wrong page again. And if you reduce that speech to bullet points, you'll find that every one of those points was addressed by one or more of Burns's poems. I want you to go from here and read Rob's poems. You read them loud and you'll have less trouble with the Scots dialect. but read them aloud. Language is for the ears, not so much for the eyes. And at the end, though, my highest regard for him was not for his political poetry or his satire or his courage or even his songs, but for Burns the man. And the best example I can give to you is the middle verse of a poem of unrequited love that he wrote called Mary Morrison. Last night, when to the trembling string the dance gaed through the lichted ha, to thee my fancy took its wing. I sat, but neither heard nor saw. Though this was fair and that was braw, and yon the toast of all the town, I sighed and said amongst them a', "You're not Mary Morrison." And I can but wonder how a man can inject such a depth of feeling in so very few words. Ladies and gentlemen, will you be please upstanding for the immortal memory? With 3 times 3, I give you the poet Robert Burns. And I had my pipes, I'd close it with a couple of tunes, but I don't, so I won't. Cheers then, stay safe, take care of each other, be kind to each other. Thank you and carry on.